1,000 years the world has waited for Catalachia, the 333rd empire of the Lizardfolk. But that's just the beginning for this mini-series for EU4's total conversion fantasy mod Anbennar. The final empire may have been proclaimed, but it is far from being eternal. Humans from both sides of the empire continue to threaten us, and the swamp trolls hold dominion over territory that should be rightfully ours. We have many missions to get through at this point. Not sure if we'll be able to get all this done in a single additional part, or if there will be a part 3, I'm not too sure. But either way, if we could get today's part to 4,000 likes, just the way you guys were able to do that with the first part, that would be incredible. Although at this point, if there's going to be a third part, I think I'm just going to go ahead and do that, even if it doesn't reach that like goal. Now, with that out of the way, let's begin. First of all, we did become a monarchy at the end of our last part, so we have to pick our new reforms. I think thematically Magical Elite makes sense just because of how intertwined the priestly class, the Nagas, if you remember them, are also very powerful mages in their own right. We essentially already have a Magical Elite, and also I just like to give the mages more influence and loyalty equilibrium because they never seem to have enough. I think I'll also go with decentralized bureaucracy just to get more loyalty equilibrium, and maybe the reduction for autonomy in territories is alright, considering I have handed out all of my land rights and the old governing capacity is not looking too hot. Next, we're going to curtail the clerical privileges because the Nagas simply have way too much influence. I also appreciate that admin tech cost reduction. As for the military doctrine, I think what we did during the tribal stage of our government was the environmental protection charm, which makes sense because if we go ahead and take a look at the casualties, we are getting a pretty significant number from attrition. And that's of course due to the area being tropical, plus 2 attrition for enemies, just that's a flat percentage. So we're going to go ahead and try to mitigate that. Second order of business, we have to develop the capital to 30, which makes perfect sense for us because of course we also want to spawn in colonialism, and our capital is quite cheap to develop in. The prophecy is true. Lizardfolk civilizations have risen and fallen. The jungles of Tanayas are littered with their remains, their glories, accomplishments, and failings. 332 empires across 100,000 years. New dawn after new dawn, collapse after collapse. A great empire will rise only for it to inevitably fall as the sun sets, but not for us. For the prophecy has come true. The cycle has been broken. The 333rd empire is here. The final empire, Catalachia. We shall take our place amongst the stars where no light ever fades, for our empire shall be eternal. Without spoilers, there's a little bit of foreshadowing in there, but for the rest of the game, we get this incredibly powerful modifier, total faith in the prophecy, giving us 10% morale of armies, 5 tolerance of the true faith, 10% admin efficiency, plus 2 yearly absolutism, and plus 50 maximum absolutism. We did also just spawn colonialism in the capital. Hopefully that spreads quite quickly because of course we do have these 2 lakes here. Okay, so this is about our faith in the prophecy. Of course nothing comes free. How do we know that there have been 333 empires? That's a really good question. Well, the empires supposedly stretch back 100,000 years. That's a really large amount of time. If I'm remembering, human history correctly, agricultural civilization, when people started making empires, I think that was like, what, 25,000 years ago? So even to us, it would be incomprehensible what 100,000 years of civilization would look like. But seeing as we barely even have records from the 330th empire, how could we possibly know anything about empires from over 25,000 years ago? Well, some solid archaeology would be a good start, but they haven't figured that out yet. Now, we could turn the 333 empires into metaphorical fables, more like lessons and less so actual historical fact, but if you did that, then it would undermine the whole prophecy about the 333rd empire being the eternal one, because if they're all fables, then who really cares? So we basically need to convince the people that this is truly the final empire. We cannot allow anybody to doubt prophecy. So we lose a little bit of faith in the prophecy. Instead of total faith, we're now sitting at strong faith until the end of the game. So this is a modifier where we need to make sure that we keep it up. So looking at these missions, it seems what we have to do is make sure that whenever we lose some faith, we gain it back by finishing some part of the mission tree, which I don't know how I feel about yet. We'll see. Kind of creates a race against time to make sure that people still believe that we are the final empire. So we might as well continue down our mission tree, just starting off by doing whatever we can. And I think that's going to be doing the agendas of the Nagas. The current ruler needs to complete 2. Okay, so first we're going to sell those titles, and we're going to take some things away from the merchant guilds. Frankly, they just have too much influence. So no more free enterprise. Same thing with the Ankashi. I think I'm going to get rid of the right of council. They have a solid enough loyalty equilibrium. And then unfortunately, it looks like we are going to have to wait quite a little while before we can reduce the merchant guild influence to where it needs to be. With that money, I'm going to pay off my 1% loans. Then we're going to take them back out for almost double their value. And we'll use that money to pay off the 4% interest loans. And with the money left over, we're going to try and finish this mission off. Anyway, these guys are no longer guaranteed by Yazel Mora, so I'm just going to go ahead and invade them. Okay, here we have the nonsense empires. The issue of the 333 empires shows no signs in subsiding. Most lizard folk only know about a handful of the most famous empires. And even worse, some of the empires have some really dubious historiography, and some of them might turn the entire prophecy into a laughingstock. For example, the 55th empire was declared by a single hermit alone in his hut, who declared himself emperor and dared anyone to challenge him, and nobody really cared, so he became the emperor, technically. And then sometimes there have been multiple empires at the same time, including at 1.6. So predictably, faith in the 333rd empire will lie in its actions. To assuage the doubts of the populace, we need to encompass all lizard folk and reach our influence across the oceans and beyond, even into the stars. Then, at that point, even the dumbest of empires in our past will have no influence over our current belief. We lose a little bit more faith in the prophecy, including a stability. That's really, really cool. People are beginning to question their faith in the prophecy, and we can't have that. Right, we are trying to demonsterize still, and apparently I think the 331st empire, I don't remember what Karask was, but that was a dark period for humans. They didn't like that very much. Something about repression, I don't know. Anyway, we're not those guys, but it would go a long way towards being nice to the humans if we apologized for the actions of that empire. So to make some amends, we'll lose 15 prestige and 50 diplo power. For the next reform, I think I would actually very much like to take general estates. Even though it does give more influence to all of the estates, the main point is that calling the Diet no longer increases influence, and that's important for us because we're going to be doing a lot of that. Namely, our current ruler does need to complete 2 of the agendas, so we might as well go ahead and start one of them. Oh boy, okay, so we actually need to be friends with some countries. Either 100 opinion or maximize improve relations and a gift. For 3 different countries. Weird that one of those is Pinghoi, considering, you know, we're pretty far from one another, but sure, they don't even know we exist, but that's cool. Might actually have an easier way of finishing this mission. I don't think I have to go to war with Yazel Mora. I mean, I probably still will, but for the time being, at the very least, we can just take this stuff. Ooh, okay, hold on, that's a tough one. Powerful mage heir. Average claim, lose 25 legitimacy for this. Really hoping that they're going to be better. Please be a better heir. Ah, they're worse. They're so much worse. It's not even by a little bit, like it's 4 whole points. I mean, they're a powerful mage, at least. That's great. That's really cool. And the heir is plain touched. Like, that's really great, man. But if only you had more points, like that would be really, really great. I'm wondering at this point, maybe I want to also move my trading capital away from where it currently is. Maybe move that to this area. I think I'll temporarily make a little bit less money, just not significantly, and it's probably better in the long run. There we go, we've built enough temples, the economy's ticked down enough, we can finish this off finally. We have to give a lot of credit to the Naga for bringing about the prophesized final empire, where they have guided our society for centuries at the very least. But there are those Naga who are far away from the cities and may not yet realize that the prophecy has been fulfilled. So we must seek out and support these local tribal Naga. All owned provinces of our primary culture will lose 10 years of separatism and minus 10% local autonomy. I think the reason why it's our primary culture, Araske, is because you can form Atalashia as pretty much any of the Lizardfolk. And as the Ryaz mission tree mentioned, we are some of the more rural ones, but additionally those provinces that have a church or cathedral in jungle terrain also get another minus 10% local development cost. Oh yeah, we also have a whole mechanic for the merfolk that I didn't even touch upon. We have to go specifically to this one province here and then click the treat with the mayor button. They'll only treat with us every 5 years, and they are pretty unfriendly towards us, so maybe we can fix that. I think the cheapest option for us is just to gain the 1 inflation, and in any case, no matter what we pick, they always like us a little bit more, so that's fine. Okay, now I said I didn't really want to go to war with Yazel Mora, but I guess that's not really much of a choice. Interesting. I was really hoping for a little bit of peace and quiet for the next couple of years, but alright, I guess. Well, actually, I was hoping to invade these guys, but going to have to put that on pause for a moment. Now, it's not ideal because, of course, I was keeping a lot of my forts down. I didn't even see that they owned this. So yeah, they're gonna take like 1 fort, maybe? I think. Not exactly ideal. Of course, our military is actually quite good compared to theirs, so getting some stack wipes off, it really isn't too difficult. 105th Empire, people are starting to question faith in the prophecy. Man, we really don't have time for this, do we? We don't really have time for any of this. So there's basically evidence that the Naga may or may not have been kind of fabricating stories about the old empires to legitimize themselves. Like, obviously they're new, they haven't been around forever since, with the collapse of the 330th Empire, they arrived to guide the Lizardfolk to the prophesied Final Empire. Except that they've tried to convince people that with the 105th Empire, the ruler died and the empire collapsed specifically because they didn't listen to the Naga, which theoretically didn't exist yet. So people are really questioning their faith in the prophecy. We now have increased advisor costs and -5 tolerance to the true faith, and we pray that nothing bad happens for the rest of this war, because we can easily solve this if only I weren't at war with Yazel Mora. On the other hand, this war is a fantastic opportunity for another mission, so it's not that bad. I hate having to do this, but I am going to have to take out some more loans, actually. I'm gonna go ahead and just embrace the institution and pick up the next tech for mill. Next idea group, I think I might actually be leaning towards admin, just to complete the admin influence policy for cheaper integration. I'll start making a bunch of subjects and then integrating them. And also for the additional governing capacity, that would be quite nice. We do get a little more pretty soon, but still, that additional 20% is going to be invaluable. One of the things this country is sorely lacking is roads. It just takes so long to get from one end of the country to the other. You could spend like 7 months crossing this whole place. Yazel Mora has just made an absolutely brilliant decision to move their troops onto these islands. Free stack wipe, we love those. And yeah, this sucks, but we're losing money. I think I'm gonna go ahead and sell some titles, I guess. Don't want to take out even more loans. Man, it's a good thing I took out those loans. We have the halfling exception. They are perhaps the only foreigners who make regular forays into Lizardfolk territory. They frequent our ports, we have long traded with them, so we can integrate halfling culture. Every Vizimbi halfling country gains 50 opinion of us, and of course it costs a lot. So Yazel Mora, we're going to take everything outside of the Shadow Swamp itself, including this stuff which we actually do need. I'm also going to of course take full money and war reps from them as punishment, and I think that should suffice for now. With that money I could pay off my loans, but equally important, I need to finish a mission. This one over here, in fact. We have exactly 10 mutation provinces, and they each need a courthouse. As much as I would like to give myself a break because we have no manpower, unfortunately, for us to increase our faith in the prophecy, we're going to have to invade this guy. Let's not forget we do need to treat with the mayor. 20 prestige is a very low price to pay. For now, I'm going to return 1 province to our subject from this guy, also full money, war reps, break their alliances, that kind of thing. And then from our main target here, we're going to take everything except for... well, no, I guess we probably should take everything here. They do have 1 core that my subject would like to have. Unfortunately, that's kind of too bad. Speaking of subjects, however, we can hand some stuff over to this guy. Not too much though, because I am kind of going to need it. Interesting, so the merfolk actually have had a sort of shift in power. They're much more willing to work with us, and are even offering us tribute for future cooperation. And honestly, we don't need the tribute. Something tells me they wouldn't really be able to offer us much more than we can already get ourselves. So instead, we should just treat them as guests and neighbors. At this point, I would like to complete the agenda for the Nagas, so we'll just go ahead and do that. And I should have realized that I had too much Diplo power. I forgot that it even gave us that. Oh boy, 29th Empire. Yeah, things are not going great so far. Some of the stories of the empires of old can stretch the suspension of disbelief. Some of them are easy enough to brush off, especially if they're old enough, because who knows what was going on back then. But some, like the 29th Empire, whose emperor supposedly devoured the gods, the demon he made a pact with, and the sun itself, maybe they're just a little too far-fetched to believe. And so yeah, we have failing faith in the prophecy. Don't worry, I'll solve this soon. It's not a big problem. Speaking of which, we've actually just finished a mission, not specifically the one that we might need, but we'll take it. When the gods created Lizardfolk, they also created guides for their creations. The first Arizari, the Thraxis, and from it was born every other Arizari. Most of them live on the water, not just the sea, but the very air itself, skipping from raindrop to raindrop, passing through the mists, appearing to lost sailors and waylaid explorers to help them. So supposedly it's kind of like a magical light creature, maybe? Kind of seems like a will-o'-the-wisp. Anyway, we get 3 Marines when recruiting explorers, and we also get Arizari support until the end of the game, allowing us to recruit explorers and conquistadors. Now, we should probably try and complete a second diet from the Naga. This one, oh, that's super easy. Okay, perfect. Alrighty. So that should actually allow us to, well, should have allowed us to finish this off. The merchants are sitting at 50.3% influence. That's really cool. So basically, I'm just gonna get rid of this. The final prophesied empire has been declared, a joyous occasion, surely? No, say the peasantry. They doubt us. They doubt the Naga. How on earth could one possibly reliably count 333 empires? They say this is all a conspiracy by the Naga. Nobles, merchants, adventurers, mages, inventors, so many demand for more say in how this empire is run. This empire was prophesied by the Naga. It was delivered under the guidance of the Naga. It shall be run under the watchful eyes of the Naga for now and forever. For this empire is forever, as too is the will of the Naga. This grants the Naga complete dominance, which gives them another 5 maximum privileges. Kind of insane. In fact, we should also just grant this because why not? At this point, they have maximum influence and maximum loyalty equilibrium, so sure. All provinces with a courthouse also get minus 5% local development cost, which is quite nice. They're just negotiated with the Mer again, and they have great interest in talking to us. These are no longer isolated settlements. Instead, now they provide 15% trade value, minus 10% local ship cost, and a little bit of monthly autonomy. With that last courthouse, we now control most of the various homelands for the different Lizardfolk mutations. It's amusing that humanity considers elves, orcs, dwarves, and harpies all as separate races from themselves. The mutations different types of Lizardfolk can exhibit vary so incredibly wildly. Extra sets of arms, eyes, legs, massive hulking armored bodies that rival a troll in size, to the small scuttling bodies of lizards near indistinguishable from kobolds. These are all Lizardfolk and all part of the final empire. Bring all mutation variations under our control and let them understand that all mutations of Lizardfolk are part of the 333rd Empire. We can now have up to 5 mutations at once. Mutations, I believe, are the privileges handed out to our various estates. So the Naga, Kakakaya, and Thanats to begin with. We must own every province in Tanayas for one of our missions, and furthermore, I'd like to take some land back for our subject. So we're going to go to war with Wegabiga. Now that this fort is done, we can finish off another mission. Something interesting about Lizardfolk architecture is that it has no real cohesive style. Some cities have stood for tens of thousands of years, building and rebuilding on top of themselves over and over again. This will increase faith in the prophecy, finally. And 4 of our cities get minus 50% province governing cost and minus 20% development. Really not too tough of a war. We'll go with the merchant reform for cheaper advisors. And then we'll just take what we came here for. But yeah, I didn't even notice, but we could actually start our golden era. Could have done that a long time ago actually, but we might as well get it started now. At the same time, I'll also go ahead and grab religious wars, of course. And we finally integrated our subject Ashakani. They have most of the Rada Lizardfolk culture, which we still have to develop actually, because we need 140 development in that culture. That should not be too difficult. The 2 greatest cities of Lizardfolk in Shalazar and Zarat have historically also hosted the greatest council of Naga across Tanayas. over the centuries, these two hubs of Naga have grown apart and thus have developed different opinions on how we should organize society. We must root out this factionalism, for if we don't, it might serve to undermine the legitimacy of the prophecy. Doing so increases our faith in the prophecy, and now, while we have the Naga mutation, we functionally get 30 more maximum absolutism. And now that we have control over all of the Ashana Lizardfolk provinces, hopefully we can end the Blood Curse. The Blood Curse was a result of the curse of the Night Hag's Coven, presumably the same coven which holds control over the swamp in Yazel Mora, and although it was unfortunate, the collapse of the 332nd Empire was not the first time a disease would be so catastrophic. However, if we can maintain control over every Ashana Lizardfolk, we should be able to prevent any of them from falling into a frenzy ever again. So we now get a permanent claim on the Shadow Swamp, and for 50 years we get +1 missionary. Not a huge fan of this mission, as it requires us to move our capital again, but I guess we can go ahead and do that. Choosing a capital has of course been incredibly annoying, as every single Lizardfolk city believes their own to be the most important. Even the Naga have their own loyalties and aren't able to put them aside to make an objective decision, so we're left with but one choice. That would be the largest fish market on Lake Lasadza. Since the area is not particularly politically important, and all Lizardfolk do enjoy a good fish from Lasadza, it makes the perfect choice. We upgrade our clerical inward focus. It now grants scaling all power cost up to -10%. I did just skim over an event that I probably should have read, but basically we improved our relations with the merfolk to the point where we are now allied, and we can begin to create new merfolk settlements on our other islands, so long as the province has a marketplace and 15 development, among some other things. We have another demonsterization event, and it seems that the Lizardfolk use a very interesting form of writing. Zitazashtu, or 9-color writing, uses different multicolored inks for expression, but most other species are incapable of seeing some of these colors. So if we want to spread our literature, we should probably use alternate colors visible to the non-Lizardfolk. We could just use annotations or refuse to change anything, but I think I'm okay with paying that cost. Having built 20 docks, my favorite building, and at least 20 marines, we can now finish this mission off. Lizardfolk are special compared to many other races because our diversity of mutation allows us to live just about anywhere, even entirely underwater. Our seafaring expertise has since dwindled since the collapse of the 80th Empire though, so if we are to be the final empire, we should at least be able to inhabit all of the territory that the previous empires had. For 100 years, we get +1 colonist and 100% colonial range, as well as a permanent claim on Jasir Jadid. That would of course be this region over here. As for our policy, we will go with the repression one, just because it increases our settler increase rather significantly. And now we are ready for another war against the Yazel Mora. This time, however, we will be the ones invading. Also, we can have more mutations, but I didn't even put them on, so what do we have here? I think the Trazoskala are probably fine. 10% reduced land attrition is quite nice. We have more doubts about the legitimacy of some stories about the 241st Empire this time, namely that it allegedly was based along the same river, the Mother Sorrow, that Katarata is based around. Except new maps discovered in Aelintir drawn up by the Precursor Elves indicate that the river had not yet existed at that point. So people begin to question the prophecy again. Another demonsterization event. We've never recognized the capacity of other species to produce high civilization, but we're beginning to conceive of a new universal principle of sentience, a broader threshold of moral reasoning which all sentient species can be said to have achieved. Our new compromise is that yes, we are still the most refined of the civilizations on Halann, but this is a consequence of our long-standing history, a function of time, not morality. Adopting this new stance would reconcile our institutions with the opening of our society. And of course, we will go ahead and do that. Despite being 3 and then partway through the war 4 attacks behind us, they are still pretty tough to fight. We did take quite a few casualties, of course half of them being attrition, but finally we can take our 100% peace deal, and it will be all of this stuff, including the heart of the swamp itself, even if that is 138% overextension. Oh, there goes the Emperor. We have a new one who's not exactly amazing, and an heir who is somehow even worse. Fortunately, our Emperor, although not very diplomatically, administratively, or militarily inclined, is a fire plane touched and a powerful mage, so maybe we can do something with that. And his first act is, of course, to mint more coins. Very wise, sir. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and select a new deity. We'll go with tech cost and admin advisor cost. We have an important system of speech patterns and hierarchy in the Lizardfolk society, but outsiders have trouble mastering the complex system of bowing, speech modulation, conversational order, and even meal choice, which constitute the etiquette of the High Naga, for example. So perhaps we should begin to make exceptions for foreign visitors and diplomats. We could choose not to, but we do want to continue demonsterizing. Man, the heir is a powerful mage, but I'm gonna be honest, I just need better points. It's cool, but I mean, it's a free removal actually. I kind of prefer this. Goodbye. Anyway, let's go ahead and sell a few titles, take some land back for money, and I think I'd actually like to repay all of my loans. Well, the 1% loans at least, because of course we can take them out and they will be much larger. Also, our quote, powerful mage ruler, yeah, he's just decent in one thing. He's really good at making the plants grow. Nice. But only in one province. Well, maybe if he studies long enough, we can enhance his abilities. We'll also make him into a war wizard, and if we're lucky, maybe he'll like die in a siege or in a battle or something. Because Anbennar specifically actually changes the way that the death ticks work, so just as a general, he's not any more likely to die, so we're actually going to have to put him on an army and fight some battles, or do some sieges. Having cored the area around the Shadowroot Matriarch, that being this very large tree in the center here, and actually correlating with this great project, for 100 admin we will replace the old Shadowroot Matriarch with a new purified one. The night hags of Yazel Mora have terrorized the Lizardfolk since they arrived shortly after the Day of Ashen Skies, year 1 of the modern calendar. Terrifying though they may be, in the grand scale of Lizardfolk history, that is but a blip on the timeline. Their power is but a fraction of some of the most terrible creatures that have collapsed Lizardfolk society over time. The 271st Empire, the most advanced Lizardfolk empire since the very first, was drowned by magical beings from across the ocean. There are also the many Lizardfolk empires that were brought to ruin by the mythical being known only as Zarat, including the 85th, 99th, 100th, 120th, and 121st. The Night Hags are just another in the long list of powerful beings the Lizardfolk eventually overcame. They cannot collapse this empire, for this is the 333rd Empire, and our reign is eternal. The swamp was once home to Lizardfolk too, before those hags took control. It will belong to Lizardfolk soon once again. Every province in the Shadow Swamp region, including the ones that I don't own, get Lizardfolk Reclamation, giving them minus 75% local culture conversion cost and plus 5% local missionary strength. When those provinces are converted to Lizardfolk culture, those bonuses are removed, and each province gains plus 3 development, one of each category, and loses minus 15 devastation. We need to go to war yet again, this time against Badabi. We're looking to create a canal if we own this one province, and I mean it is a core of a subject, I just won't give it to them. Either way, we do have to go to war, and I will do it with reconquest. I just need you to break your 2 alliances, that's totally fine. We're gonna take this stuff in this war, just a little bit of money, and all of these provinces here. I'm gonna keep that myself, even though it is a core of my subject. But I will give them this stuff. Now that we own it and we are acquainted, or rather allied, with the merfolk currently, we can begin building the merfolk canal. Merfolk and lizardfolk have not always gotten along, sometimes erupting into open hostility. Much of this enmity is caused by the merfolk settling the sacred Arzkit's Zatsaria, which is, I believe, one of these spires over here. It's one that's underwater. Anyway, the merfolk queen has approached us with the idea of building a canal across the Jasir Jadid. This would have benefits for both us and the merfolk, as it would enable us to have easier shipping into Haless, and likewise it would allow the merfolk to travel a lot easier as well. So we get the East unlocked, giving us 25% naval force limit modifier for the rest of the game, and we can build the canal as soon as we have the money. A new heir who is also a powerful mage. 412, not exactly amazing or anything, but okay. Oh, interesting, okay. Well, I just went ahead and developed the capital so I could spawn in the printing press, and we just got this event. I guess for bringing it to 30 development, so that's cool. We're winning in the Clash of Schools, except I thought there was no Clash of Schools. I thought we already won. Yeah, we're victorious. Well, in any case, I'm going to continue developing the capital, although I think at this point I might even take out a loan and I will debase some currency just to make that a level 3. This event's a little different from the other prophecy events. It speaks of an immortal being known as Zarat, who was personally responsible for ending multiple empires until eventually brought face to face with an eternal being known as Thraxis. When faced with the eternal being, Zarat realized even her immortality could not compete with eternity and slunk off into darkness, never to be seen again. So those who believe in the prophecy also believe that Zarat is real, and those who believe in Catalachia being the final empire also believe that they are now living in the state of eternity. So the people believe that Zarat will never come back at this point, and as a result, faith in the prophecy actually improves. Our missions don't necessarily require it, but I would like to reconquer the rest of this territory for my subject. However, I won't be using a reconquer CB because our aggressive expansion is pretty negligible at the moment, and I can take far more using just claims. We'll just go ahead and fully annex both of them. Well, that's convenient. We can use this money to start building our canal, in theory. Oh yeah, here's that spire I was talking about, by the way. The sunken spire of Arskitz, where the merfolk have settled. There we go. It's going to take us quite a few years to actually finish this canal, but in a decade we will be able to move our ships across without having to do this whole thing. We're already on our 8th reform, and we are relying pretty heavily on loans, so reducing inflation and interest would be nice. Ooh, this one's interesting. This is related to the canal that we're building. As I said, we would get this event in 5 years, and here we are. For doubters of the 333 empires, the supposed Empire of Souls in Haless is a source of mockery. If every empire, bar one, between the 34th and the 43rd empire was based out of Haless, then why do no Lizardfolk live there now? Why are there no Lizardfolk ruins? Claiming it was tens of thousands of years ago is fanciful, as we have ruins of ancient empires across Tanais. Were the buildings too spirited away? Ever since the Merfolk Canal was built, which it technically isn't, but whatever, and journeys to Haless became easier, more and more Lizardfolk merchants have been traveling to the continent, and word has been spreading of something that may indeed prove the Empire of Souls. As we understand it, each region of Haless is guarded by a great spirit, a dragon, an elephant, a carp, a fox. So what is the great spirit that rules over the Lupulan rainforest, the most natural habitat for lizardfolk on the continent? A lizard. The coincidence is too great. It must know of the Empire of Souls. It must have come from the times of the Empire of Souls. As we quash any doubters of the 333 empires, we must gather definitive proof of their existence. And in the spirit of Lupulan, we may have an answer. This gives us a permanent claim on Halann. It increases our faith in the prophecy, which is quite nice. And I just find that, frankly, hilarious. Because no, I actually don't think that the coincidence here is too great. It would actually make a lot of very natural and not at all weird sense to have a lizard in the jungle as the spirit. But anyway, it would actually be incredibly easy for us to invade Halann because they're already getting destroyed, and they're only allied to one very small country. I actually completely forgot that I could explore, so I should probably go ahead and do that. I've also noticed that some other countries have been exploring, like Yazel and Exwes and Laurent and Vern, and I kinda don't like that. Anyway, let's declare war on Halann. Finally, I have a reason to use my marines. Well, the Emperor did die on that siege as expected. Tragically, that means, of course, we lost 2 stability. That's great. Okay, Halann, we're just going to take that one province. We can't do much with it for now, but we'll just sort of hang on to it. We just had one last generic demonsterization event before this one. Translations of our works sit in libraries across the world. When foreigners visit, they show the proper wonder and deference as they walk under our ancient gates, knowing that the buildings they glimpse are older than their entire cultures. Though the niceties are still awkward, we now receive envoys more or less smoothly, and can compel them through politeness to show dignified deference to our leaders. This is the lesson of the Lizardfolk. Adapt if you must, but maintain your dignity. Never allow the world to see you needily scrape, or they will replace monster with beggar and continue quite merrily with their disrespect. We are the standard bearers for the oldest civilization on Halann, and this legacy now garners the respect it should. Never will we sacrifice the principles which make us great. The rest of the world has been civilized. We are no longer monstrous, and our capital now receives a very small amount of institution growth. I just got Shangri to 12 base tax development, which allows us to finish off this mission. As previously mentioned, the Lizardfolk script is written in 9 different colors, making it quite complex. But in recent years, in an attempt to diversify our script and allow both our merchants and non-lizard folk to read, a simpler version was devised using only 4 colors. The simpler script has allowed for more widespread writings and, I guess, more widespread literacy in that case, and as such has allowed erroneous understandings of Anzel, our religion, to spread. Fortunately, all of the records of the previous empires for thousands of years are held in the town of Shangri, and so if we place all of the original texts under the control of our Naga, and in theory only translate particular sections into the simpler text, then these erroneous ideas should stop spreading, hopefully. We get the Shangri records privilege for the Nagas, granting -5% idea cost. The province also receives a university and loses 100 years of separatism. Now, some of those events that normally lower the faith in the prophecy can be averted for a cost, and the Naga mutation no longer increases technology cost. Oh, okay. Not really sure what's going on here. I asked the guys on the Discord, and they kind of have no idea what's happening either, so I'm just gonna go ahead and win this war. Maybe there's an event that happens afterwards, allegedly, possibly, that cedes control over all this stuff to my new subject. So we're just gonna win the war, see what we can do, and if not, we always have commands. Now, for something to be considered a win, they really just have to have like positive war score and a peace deal. The thing is, I don't want to spend like 300 aggressive expansion consolidating my own subject back into my country, especially for something that really shouldn't have happened, and I was kind of joking, but that actually is 322 aggressive expansion. So that being said, we're just gonna have one little province, see if this works. Will there be an event? There is no event. So instead, we get to use the consul, my favorite. I'm going to annex that country. Then I vassalize my former subject, so they are now a subject again. And then I will give them their ores back. It's almost like nothing happened. We do now have enough crown land, just barely because of how much the Nagas control, but we can finish this mission off. As the empire grows, so does the endless administrative work. And in the past, under the 167th Empire, a sophisticated bureaucratic system was developed to the point where they didn't even need a king to continue serving the empire. It got to the point where the king abdicated and handed the crown over to a chokin, which I believe is a literal chicken. And yet, the empire remained running for the next 80 years. Now, that being said, we don't plan to put a chokin in charge, but there is a lesson to be learned about improving our bureaucratic apparatus. The Naga gain 5% more crown land. The church estate privileges in total now cost no absolutism, and we gain the laws of the Naga. All provinces which have a courthouse or town hall get -5% development cost. On top of that, we also increase our faith in the prophecy. We have the 250th Empire, which seemed to exist in a place unknown to us, potentially even located between realms. much like the 239th Empire, which was actually banished to the Shadow Plane. But then this raises the awkward question, should they actually count as an empire if they weren't in this plane of existence? The obvious answer is that whatever counts as an empire is whatever's convenient to us, but people do lose faith in the prophecy. After 5 long years of regency, we now have our new emperor, and I really don't think I need that much crown land, so I will sell some titles. I don't know why I tried taking anything back. Literally, I can't seize land at the moment. I will just wait 5 years anyway, but we're gonna hold on to that for a moment. And we're going to declare our war. And we will use our anti-monstrous conquest. Very quick war. I noticed some other countries also declared war on them, so I actually don't want them to take this stuff. They're pretty close to it, and I'm just gonna peace out. Now, this peace deal, it's not exactly super pretty, but it's exactly what I need in order to block other countries from being able to take stuff that I want to take. So now they should only border me and some wastelands. Okay, maybe I traded this guy a little bit too harshly. I just went ahead and enhanced ability, and it actually increased the Diplo by 2, so okay. I apologize, I was not familiar with your game. We should continue studying magic actually, and I should stop making this guy a war wizard because maybe he's actually decent. Maybe. You know, I was kind of thinking, like, I have this mission where I have to have the most ships in the world or 250 ships. I kept thinking I'm at like 120 ships. Who could possibly have more than me? Hello, that's 197 ships from Calcito Sovg. I thought your name was Calcito Sojdal. Okay. Anyway, yeah, that would do it. Every province they have is pretty much coastal, so that makes sense. Ooh, and actually good air. Okay. We can work with that. Let's not forget to clean up this area as well. We're going to actually co-belligerent Badabi, and we'll see if we can annex both of them. For the next idea group, I'm not even really sure what I want, but I do like divine ideas. I like them a lot, actually. Minus 10% fire damage received? I mean, if you stack that with the minus 15 we already get, that's kind of crazy. Yeah, you know what? Unless I need a particular idea group in the missions, it doesn't really look like it, so we'll take that. Ooh, hold on. I could get another powerful mage heir. I'm gonna be so upset if he sucks, but I mean, we do love a good gamble. Let's go, we're so back. Okay, I have no idea what's going on. I kind of just passed by this. Something to do with the Shadow Swamp. 2 people died. I lost 2 manpower and just kind of brushed by it. But it seems more people are dying, so we should probably investigate. Apparently we have this alter ego spirit that perfectly assumes the identity of their target. Finally, we have Anbennar analog horror. Anyway, we should probably investigate. For the low cost of an arm and a leg, I have upgraded our great project to level 3. I like that it gives us 333% tax modifier. That's pretty funny. But even cooler than that, it allows us to change our deity at any time. Super useful. So of course we have Zyani, the greatest of all Zatsaria, or the Spires. Remember, these things were built by the First Empire, and since then, nobody but the Naga have been allowed inside any of these things. But now that we are the final empire, how much longer do we have to wait before we can crack one of these things open and take a look at what the precursors left us? By precursors, I mean, of course, like the First Lizard Empire, not like the elves. We do get an event. Peering out over the great city of Zarat stands Zyani. Many Zatsaria were gifted to the First Lizardfolk Empire by the gods, yet none remain as complete and unblemished as the Spire in Zarat. In the stillness of the morning light, as the small crowd waited for the Emperor to speak, Nordus Rex II steeled their nerves. He knew that the statement they were about to make would cause controversy, not least amongst the Naga, but it was time. They were the final empire. If not now, then when? I am lifting the ban on entering the upper floors of this Zatsaria. His next words were instantly drowned out by murmurs and shouts from the crowd. Several Naga, including the leading figure in the current High Temple, started to move forward, but Nordus Rex II continued. The gods left us these spires to be used when we are ready. For as long as lizard folk have dwelled here, we have not been ready. True, there have been no signs from the gods, nor anyone that we are ready, but the inheritance was left for us to discern, and we are the final empire. He stepped forward, pushing ahead of the Naga that were slithering onto the stage. We are the prophecy. There is nothing beyond our capabilities because there is nothing beyond us. We will uncover the mystery of the spires, for if we are eternal, then it is simply a matter of when. Pretty solid point, can't really argue with that. We increase our faith in the prophecy, finally bringing us back to total faith, and we unlock the ability to repair the spire in Zarat. So that's 50 of each point, 250 ducats, and we need to activate it. Okay, should be simple enough. Okay, and of course, we immediately get another one. Okay, actually, give me 1 second. I'm gonna leave that up for a moment. I'm just gonna exile these guys to a single desert province, and then we will fully annex this guy. Okay, I just wanted to keep that admin efficiency for a little bit. So we have a story about the Jin Wars of Hegemony. This great Jin known as Grand Sultan subjugated pretty much everyone in his path, did a big ritual. It succeeded, but the Jin unmade his own existence. And then in the 303rd Empire, basically the same thing happened, so we're thinking, oops, maybe a Lizardfolk scholar accidentally mistook the Jin Wars of Hegemony story to be a Lizardfolk empire, and if that's true, that kind of sucks. So we lose a bit of faith in the prophecy. That's kind of it. Now, let's repair that spire and see what happens. Okay, we did actually manage to find the creature and capture it. And honestly, I kind of do want to give it to the mages. Because if I can get the mages to above 66, I think, % influence, then they can actually cast useful spells. Oh boy. Activating the Zatsaria. A barricade had been erected to watch the activation of the Zatsaria behind, but the Emperor refused to stand behind it. If whatever was summoned upon the activation of the spire was dangerous, a pile of sticks would not be sufficient protection. Instead, he insisted on being the one to turn the ancient stone crank that the engineers believed, with about 40% certainty, would kickstart the machinery inside. He grasped the dark stone handle and smiled at the nearby engineer who flinched upon seeing him hold it. "Do not worry. This empire is to last for eternity," said Nordus Rex II. He began to turn the crank, which moved with surprising ease, as though it was merely pushing through water. "Activating the Holy Spire will not end it. I am a devout believer in the prophecy, my Emperor." The engineer started inspecting the whirring gears behind the transparent stone. "I believe Catalassia will stand until the end of days. What I fear is that we may be about to bring that end. If we are the final empire, are we about to end eternity?" The Emperor lifted his hands off the handle and stood back, but now the crank was moving on its own. Every part of the spire was moving. The walls shifted and glittered with the lights of a million stars. Then, with one final blinding light, it was gone. Zarat was gone. Panias was gone. Halann was gone. What have we done? The front gate entering the Zatsaria no longer gazed over the city of Zarat, but over a calm sea. The sky was a deep navy blue with a few twinkling lights, but for one section of the sky. There hovered an inky black dot with a ring of blinding light around its perimeter. It looked like the opposite of the sun, a darkness so deep it seemed to reject the very concept of light. The first to step foot outside the spire was a guard who had entered with the Emperor. Gingerly poking at the dark soil before stepping out, he prodded the ground with the butt of his sword before stepping anywhere. Another guard followed, then one of the craftspeople, and finally, Emperor Nordus Rex II. Beneath his feet shifted a fine dark sand like the beaches in Favanasi. He stepped into the sea, letting the water wash calmly around his feet. He stood there, motionless, as his eyes adjusted to the dark sky. What should he call it? Romutha, dark sun in Lizardfolk, perhaps? It was peaceful. "My Emperor, come here quick. We're trying to reactivate the Zatsaria." The head engineer stood just outside the water and gestured furiously at Nordus Rex II. He contemplated rejecting the call. There were no Naga in his ear this time, driving him to constantly improve. Here, on Romutha, there was just the sound of the waves. But he did not. He stepped out of the water through the doors of the spire and turned the handle as before. The same lights, the same gears, the same stars all sparkled, until through the doors one gazed out again over the two lakes that flanked Zarat. Nordus Rex II stepped out of the spire, tracking dark sand into the courtyard as attendants and Naga rushed to his side and squinted at the blinding light of the familiar sun. Okay, we get 20 prestige and we can build a colony at this location. Okay, that's one way to do colonization. Sure, alright. So, that's what it means by colonization in progress. Man, okay, and it actually does take a colonist. Okay, in that case, I think I'm going to hold off on that for a little bit because there are a few provinces that I do want to grab around here. And then once those are colonized, then maybe... Well, I guess I could always just take stuff from these guys. Like, I don't know why Eberthil and Neckcliff and whoever else here, Exquest, Reveria, everyone here wants some piece of this. And I might just let them colonize it and then I'll take it later. Oh, and of course, the guy dies, because why not? You know, no one can live past the age of 20, that would be a crime. That's cool. I don't really need to go to war with this guy, but I might as well pop out a vassal and ask them for money because I always need more money for some reason. We're gonna grab the rest of the swamp that's under their control, as well as all this coastal stuff over here, plus war reps and a little bit of money. And the reason we're doing that is because I want to release a subject whose name I actually do not remember. I've set up the remaining colonies that I care about, so we're going to use our colonists to go ahead and colonize somewhere a little bit different. We do also have to clean up Yazel Mora a little bit. So when we colonize, we return to Romutha, we lose 500 crowns, and we get laser moths. Okay, that's full occupation and not actually full annexation, which kind of sucks. This has to be a joke, right? 109% war score cost. Well, I guess we're gonna come back in a little bit later, but it's honestly not a big deal because I can kind of just like keep them in this one little spot. We're now back in Romutha, the first other planet, honestly not sure. With every subsequent journey to Romutha, more lizardfolk and far more supplies and equipment are packed into the bottom floor of the Spire in Zarat. Food, tents, ropes, glass containers for taking samples home, and even weapons joined the colonists. Many had wondered whether the lands to which the Zatsaria had sent them were part of the Shadow Plane, the land of death where the night hags derived their power. It quickly became clear that that could not be the case. For this land, Romutha was alive. Leave the beach in the large, jagged, rocky outcrop the Spire backed into, and one entered a vast field of soft, green, leafy plants growing out of a black soil. Small insect-like creatures hopped between the leaves, skittering underground as the scouts drew near. Most extraordinarily of all were the giant caterpillar-like creatures, measuring up to 16 meters in length, leaving long tracts of chewed plants in their wake. This was far from the end of their discoveries. Large rocky spouts spewed a multicolored gas into the air, their bases teeming with a brilliant collection of plant and animal life. Far overhead, one could make out huge winged beasts, too far into the sky to make out their exact shape. But the most extraordinary discovery of all was on the final day. At the bottom of a valley, beyond lines of plants arranged far more neatly than nature would allow, lay a small town. The inhabitants did look quite different from us. They had large tails for starters, and the joints on their knees bend the other way, leading into feet with a large hook on their heel. But we had seen enough strange mutations to look beyond such minor differences. The scales, the facial structure, the eyes, there was no mistaking it. We found lizardfolk. And so the plot thickens. Obviously, these spires are like some sort of portal that go to the other dimension, or other planet or whatever. But this clearly indicates that the first lizardfolk empire was already either a, multi-planetary or multi-dimensional civilization. So in that case, the lizardfolk must have set up tons of different planetary empires or something, lots of different colonies in lots of different places. But judging from the pure number of spires that we have in Halann, not Hales, this must have been either a major hub or some kind of capital for the Lizardfolk Empire. Unless Romutha also has like 20 spires on it, I don't know. But since we have one here, and we have one here, and one here, and here, and another one here, and another one all the way over here, in fact, presumably there was something special about Halann, so either the Lizardfolk Empire must have arrived here from somewhere else, thought it was really nice, set up an empire, and started colonizing other planets or planes, or Halann was one small part of a much larger system than we could possibly comprehend. But we'll learn more in 2 years. Here we go. The medium-term goal had been to build a habitable colony in Romutha, but that was proving difficult. Building material had to be transported from Zarat, as there was nothing akin to large trees from which to build houses, and the stone here was unusually brittle. There was no day-night cycle either. The black sun and its ring of light shone down from the sky at all times. Growing crops was also proving tough. Tanayas was full of hardy plants that could sprout in mere days in even the most minimal of soil cover, but over 90% of plants failed to sprout when planted in Romutha's dark soil. The worst day, though, was nearly a year into the life of the colony. One of the flying creatures spotted in the sky during the scouting expeditions descended on one of our settlements. It resembled a butterfly, but thousands thousands of times larger, making not a sound bar the beating of its massive wings. That was until it started emitting a dark light from its body accompanied with a high-pitched whistling, before unleashing a beam of light so destructive it carved a molten path through the ground itself. It only shot once, but it was enough to destroy 2 homes and the granary before it beat its wings and rose back into the dark blue sky again. Maybe it was a mistake to try and live here. 1,000 crowns, okay, and we get another event in a year. I guess that's what it means by laser moths. That makes sense. It took many failed attempts, but the first food grown entirely on Romutha had finally been harvested. But it was no Tannius plant that fed the bellies of the colonists. We had sent our scouts on a stealth mission, hoping to learn what food the natives ate, but they were found by the natives straight away and taken into the village. The meeting was entirely friendly. The natives seemed even more shocked than we were that someone resembling Lizardfolk had visited them. Although they did not speak any language recognized by the scouts, through drawings and wild gestures our scouts were able to communicate that we had arrived via the large spire, and that they wanted to know what to eat. The natives showed them the plants they grew, where they could be found, and how to tend to them so they would grow. More and more visitors traveled to the village, often bringing gifts for the natives, who in return traveled to our new colony and marveled at the incredible structures we had built. In particular, they were bamboozled by anything made of wood, as their homes were either hewn into the rocky outcrops or nestled within the large discarded shells left by the molting giant caterpillars that ever munched their way across the landscape. It had taken years longer than even the first colonies on Elantir, but by now, with farms and new homes, we could feel safe in saying the colony Romutha was now self-sufficient. We get 50 prestige and 1 missionary and 2 tolerance of the true faith for the rest of the game. And oh, okay, we actually lose Zarat, which becomes Romutha, and that actually becomes a space colony. Okay, so I guess that answers our question. It's a space colony, not like an interdimensional colony. That's interesting. Man, I put so much dev into this too. 40 development province. Interesting. Well, I do like that flag. That's pretty cool. And what exactly does this do? Colony located outside the planet of Halann. They lose tax, land force limit, and naval force limit, but they actually get 40 land force limit back, 50,000 manpower, and 100 yearly tax income. Very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to assume that each one of these spires I can create another subject out of, which is kind of neat, but at the same time, being a space colony is cool, but it doesn't actually scale with game mechanics. Unless they get some clunky things going on here, like they don't own other provinces. There's no map for them to actually own provinces on, except for this. So we'll see how that works out. New air, actually solid. And we're finally done culture converting this one province, which we needed to do for this mission. Basically, the swamp sucked. Every part of it sucks. Because of the hag's magic, there's no color, and even though we've purified the Shadowroot matriarch, it's still taking a while for the color to return to even the trees in the swamp. Despite this, we know that Lizardfolk used to live here, and in fact, this was the capital of some different Lizardfolk empires of the past. So if we give it long enough, we should be able to live here just like we did back then. We get thrived everywhere, minus 50% culture conversion time for the rest of the game. Genuinely insane. We do also increase our faith in the prophecy. This mission's been done for quite some time. The greatest cities of Tannius have been the centers of most Lizardfolk empires, but it's not the only place Lizardfolk have ruled. The empires between the 35th and 42nd existed in Halann. The 234th and 243rd empires lay in the Salahad deserts, and the 118th empire was in Elantir, actually. So it's time we move out of Tannius to claim and reclaim all previous homes of empires past. Tannius cannot contain the final empire. Even Halann will struggle to contain our inevitability. Very apt timing to complete that, considering, you know, we just established a new colony on a different planet. Anyway, we get a permanent claim on every Lizardfolk province and increase our faith in prophecy. I get the feeling that this campaign is going to be a lot longer than I had anticipated. So I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. I suspect this video is already well above like 45 minutes probably. With that being said, I think I do want to do a third part of this, with or without a like goal, so don't worry about that. Of course, I would appreciate it if this video got to, I don't know, you guys got the last one to 4,000 likes within like 2 days. So if we can get part 2 to 4,000 likes, that would also be great. If you want to make sure you don't miss the third, and I honestly don't know at this point, but there might even be a fourth part, then go ahead, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell to make sure you have your notifications on. But with that said, thank you very much for watching. This is Corbett signing off, and as always, have a fantastic day.